Well, hi everybody, it's Rusty again, and got a question for you. If you had hiked 1,500 miles, do you think you could get anything out of just a simple overnight hike with 8 miles the next day? Well, think of it this way. If you were a golfer, would you go out and play 18 holes every day? Or would you take time on the putting green or at the driving range? Well, let's talk about a practice hike that I had just recently. Well, every year I go on several what I'll call training hikes to help me just learn new equipment, assess my condition, and learn anything else that I might want to do to improve my routine. So every year I go up to Mount Monadnock as one of my first hikes of the year. And Mount Monadnock's not actually all that high, but it is a tough climb. So what I do is I go up to the state park. I camp out at a remote site in the state park overnight, and then in the morning I break camp, I pack up, and I hike to the top with a full pack. Not something you normally do on Mount Monadnock. There's really no point in it unless you're doing it for training. And then back down. And on this particular trip, I learned a lot more than I expected. I mean, I went out there with the intent of checking out some new equipment, which I'll get to, but boy, a lot more happened than I really had expected. Now, the particular lessons that I learned probably don't apply to you specifically, but what I'm trying to do is just show you the mindset that you ought to be in when you go on these training hikes. It's like practicing on the putting green, like I said in the introduction. Let's improve our game, improve our hiking by consciously always thinking about what it takes. Now, when Mike and I were out in New Jersey and New York on the Appalachian Trail, we ran into several people out there who admitted to us right up front. They said, hey, we're new at hiking. We're just out here to learn. And you know, that is the fantastic attitude. And I think they'll have actually a nice hiking life ahead of them if they approach it with that attitude. So the first thing that I discovered when I pulled out my hygiene kit, my first aid kit, when I pack, I actually pull those things out. I check and I make sure that their contents are up to date and I have everything that's supposed to be in them. And what I found was, you know, being kind of the first hike of the year that was an overnighter, all the consumables in there, you know, the over-the-counter medications, the vitamin I or ibuprofen, the Claritin. Claritin's very expensive. They'd all expired because I left them there for 6 months. So, you know, a lesson not out from the trail itself, but is like, I've got to actually clear out these kits at the end of the hiking season, put them back in the medicine cabinet so we at least can use them throughout the year. We're not heavy over-the-counter medication users, but it's nice to have Claritin during pollen season. So, you know, instead of throwing about $30 or $40 worth of over-the-counter medications and that sort of thing, I'll be putting them in the medicine cabinet. Another thing is I carry hand sanitizer, you know, Germ-X or something like that, Perel, in these little bottles here. And I could only find one of them, and I couldn't figure out, like, what happened to my other one? And then I realized that, oh yeah, this was an improvement that I hadn't totally formalized, but I actually did start last year, and that is, what do you need with your toilet paper? I know it's a little off color. You always need hand sanitizer. Well, I found that I can just carry one of my bottles of hand sanitizer like this. I've got it in the waterproof baggie, so whenever I'm in need of the toilet paper, I've got the hand sanitizer right there, so I don't have to run around. Excuse any noises that happen there. I don't have to rummage around to try finding it. So just a minor improvement in my routine. Another thing, my toothbrush in the hygiene kit was a science experiment. I don't know what nastiness was in there, but I threw it out. I mean, I have these little portable toothbrushes that are travel toothbrushes, and I really only use them, you know, for each hike and throw it out. So I just got to remember to throw that out. So a few minor things. Now, surprisingly, one of my biggest things I learned had to do with my sleeping bag. My sleeping bag is rated as follows. It says it's comfortable down to 44 degrees Fahrenheit. and its lower limit is 35 degrees, so that's 2 Celsius, something in that range, 1 or 2 Celsius. And I don't expect to ever test it anywhere near the comfort limit even. Well, it was May, and last year I went on this Monadnock hike in April and had no problem. Well, it got pretty cold that night, and I looked up on the almanacs the next day for all the surrounding towns, and all the surrounding towns reported 38 degrees Fahrenheit overnight. So I was well under the comfort limit, and I was actually testing this sleeping bag down to its lower expected limits. Now, these sleeping bag ratings are very subjective. What's, you know, one person's comfortable in at one temperature with the same sleeping bag, somebody else might not be. But so I have no complaints about that, but I really pushed it there. And I actually, while I felt the cold, I was well below the comfort level. My teeth weren't chattering, so it was really good for me to just know that the equipment that I bring with me, I mean, it wasn't just a sleeping bag. I had my puffy jacket on, I had a flannel shirt on, actually putting on my hat, my wide brim hat to maintain the heat. That's actually what kept me the warmest, and then putting a cloth mask over my face to keep my nose warm, because your sleeping bag's not going to keep your face warm. So I discovered that, kind of nice to discover, that my sleeping bag actually can handle any temperatures I'm likely to have to get into. Now, I normally wouldn't bring an extra flannel shirt with me, certainly not when I'm down south, but when I go up to Maine near the end of August, I will be bringing a little bit extra just in case I hit those low temperatures. So that was an eye-opener. I just did not expect to be under 40 degrees in May in, well, southern New Hampshire. So the other thing about my sleeping bag that I discovered is that, well, I didn't discover, but I kind of knew it. It actually it gets put into this compression sack to go into my backpack. It's kind of hard to tell from this camera. This is kind of a small sack. It's, I don't know, maybe a foot long and diameter of, when it's stuffed, 5 or 6 inches. And compressing a down sleeping bag is actually not good. And when you store it at home, you never put it in the compression sack. And I'm always uncomfortable about putting it in the compression sack, like for a couple days, like I might if I stop at a hostel and take a day off. It's sitting there compressed like that. So it also takes a long time. It's a good 5 or 10 minutes to take this big sleeping bag and stuff it into this sack. You know, like I always imagine my father looking at me and saying, "You're not going to get that in there." You know, because my father and I used to hike together. And, you know, I'm always surprised that it does get in there, but I just don't like the fact that it's squished down like that. So I'm actually taking a larger stuff sack for the sleeping bag, and I'm going to take that on my next training trip. The larger stuff sack will compress it less. It doesn't actually give up too much volume, but I tried it here and I was able to stuff the sleeping bag in about a minute, as opposed to struggling with it for 5 or 10 minutes. So this is going to help my breaking camp routine, because breaking camp takes a good 45 minutes for me, and that's like way too long. I really got to get it down to under a half an hour, because that's a lot of wasted hiking time. So that's an improvement I'll be doing to my routine. Now my tent, I use a high volume stuff sack for that, and it takes about 3 to 5 minutes to stuff it in there. And you know, it seems to, like, the stuff sack seems to be kind of bursting at the seams, and when I'm done with it, I have to kind of jam the little bag with the stakes in it. And I was out hiking with my son Craig, and I went to stuff that, and he said to me, "Don't you roll it up?" I said, "Nah, I just stuff it in," you know, and I didn't think rolling it up was going to make any difference. Well, on this trip, I decided to take his advice, and I rolled it up. I put the stake bag in the middle, and I rolled up the tent around it, you know, to the right width to go into this yellow stuff sack. You've seen it on pictures of my backpack, and it slid in really well. No stress on the seams of the stuff sack, and that reduced a maybe 3 to 5 minute operation down to about a minute to get that in there. So there's another improvement. At night, because it was so cold, I closed the flaps on my tent, and you know, the idea is to keep the warmth in a little better. Oh, I woke, this is like the second or third time this has happened to me when I've closed those flaps. I woke up in the middle of the night feeling very claustrophobic. I'm claustrophobic anyway, but gasping for air, and I don't know if maybe there's a carbon dioxide buildup inside the tent. It is a single walled tent. I mean, there's airflow underneath, but I'm just thinking that something like that must be happening, or the air's getting stuffy or whatever. And I just had to open one of the tent flaps to allow air in, and I felt fine after that. So I don't know if I've looked up all the symptoms of, you know, carbon dioxide exposure, not carbon monoxide, but carbon dioxide exposure. And claustrophobia wasn't on the list, but I don't know if anybody out there knows or has had this experience. Just, you know, let me know in the comments or something. But that's one of the things I'm probably not going to be doing anymore, is closing all the tent flaps if I can at all get away without doing it. I need the airflow in the tent. So, as you may know, that I got a new camp stove, a Jetboil. Now the cans actually have printed on the side of them, they say you get 24 boils out of 100 grams and you get 55 boils out of 230 grams. I in an earlier video had reported something like you get 26 and 63 out of those sizes, but that was based on reviewers, and it's actually kind of nice that the Jetboil people are actually taking a conservative line so as not to mislead you as to how much you might be able to get out of the boil, out of the can, how many boils you can get out of the can. But so it's still up in the air how many boils I'll get out of that thing. But I tried it, you know, it boiled water. That's what it's supposed to do. I cooked supper that night, which is a prepackaged meal where you just boil the water, you pour it into the bag, you seal up the bag, you know, you squish it around, you seal up the bag, and, you know, 9 minutes later you're ready to eat it. I did find that lighting it was sensitive to the breeze, and because it burned so clean, which is a good thing, it was actually hard to tell that I got it lit. You know, I had to listen, I had to kind of put my hand near it and see, yeah, there's heat there, and then I could put the pot on it. Another thing I learned is I did have eggs in the morning, and I think the pot dissipates heat quickly. When I boil eggs normally at home, you know, in a big aluminum pot, you bring it up to a boil. Once the water starts boiling, you just turn off the heat under and you let them sit there, you know, and this is a way to conserve fuel. You let them sit there and they'll harden them up after, you know, 4 or 5 minutes. Well, I found that when I tried it with the Jetboil, you know, it's just setting the pot aside, turning the Jetboil off. Yeah, those eggs were somewhere between raw and soft boiled. I mean, it just didn't work, so I had to reboil them. So on the rare occasion that I might actually have eggs for breakfast out on the trail, it's not something you can do often. You have to come across basically a farm stand with farm fresh eggs and see if they'll sell you 4 of them or a half a dozen or whatever. It's actually going to have to sit there in the boiling water for, you know, bring it up to a boil and then boil it for 3 more minutes. And that actually reduces your boil count, because really the boils that you get out of the can, that's really another way of saying how much burning time you can get out of it, and you're using double the burning time. So just something I have to be aware of. So that was a Jetboil. It did work out well. It was nice to be able to quickly boil the water, because that's what cooking out on the trail typically is. You know, jury's still out on it, but like I said, it's much more convenient than my Esbit stove, even though I'm going to keep the Esbit because I like it, and there's a few occasions where I might want to need it. Now, another thing I did was, I have a Bear Cannister. I've shown it many times here, and I decided that, you know, I'm just going to see, would it work out carrying it? I got a special strap to attach it to the top of my backpack, as you can see here. And to tell you the truth, it's 2.5 pounds of dead weight. I mean, if you don't need it, if I don't need it, I'm really not going to take it. I mean, it didn't stay attached to my pack. It did fall out on the top of Mount Monadnock, and I wasn't near a tree. I didn't bump against anything. I was out above tree line, and all of a sudden it just hit the ground. I mean, you know, it's durable, so it didn't get damaged from it, and it only fell out once. But you know, if your pack, you know, your pack changes in size because of how much food you have in it, it's eventually, you know, it's just going to not sit well. So my position now is I'm not going to take it unless I'm legally required to. Like there are certain areas where you have to have a Bear canister with you if you're going to be hiking. I think the Adirondacks there are like that. Or if I'm in the Grand Canyon, because I just know from experience in the Grand Canyon that it'd be a good idea to bring it. But other than that, the Bear Cannister, I think on the Appalachian Trail they have enough facilities for bear hangs, and the few times they don't, I'll just do a do-it-yourself bear hang. So I won't be bringing the Bear Cannister. So another lesson. My phone and my tracker, I kind of learned this before, but you know, it got reinforced here. The Far Out application, also formerly called Gut Hook, it uses the GPS, and the GPS is, at least on my phone, is a big battery drain. It's similar to Waze. If I use Waze to drive somewhere and I've got my phone plugged into the USB jack in my car, it barely holds the charge. It's like burning it as fast as it's recharging. So if you use Far Out, just be aware of this if it applies to your phone, and that is when you close the application, don't just minimize it. Actually clear it, close it, turn it off, whatever, because it does stay on and keeps using that GPS. And it does it even if you're in airplane mode. So I love the Far Out application, but I'm not constantly looking at it. I'll look at it maybe 3 or 4 times a day. So what I do is I call it up, I figure out, you know, what I need to figure out from it, and then I make sure that I swipe it away and make sure that it's actually closed and no longer sucking down battery life. The tracker, I decided to put on 10-minute tracking. I usually put it on 30-minute tracker, 30-minute tracking in order to preserve battery, and it used up 11% in 6 hours, so a little bit less than 2% per hour. Now I typically hike maybe 10 hours in a day, so that might take 20%. If I hike for 12 hours, it would take 22%, and that means that I can probably get 4 days out of it before it even requires a recharge. So I'm considering changing from a 30-minute tracking to a 10-minute tracking. Just it's more accurate that way, and it gives Darlene a little more peace of mind that she can see where I am every 10 minutes as opposed to every half hour, because if it misses a ping, then it's an hour between marks, whereas with 10 minutes, if it misses a ping, because it can't hit the satellites because of tree canopy or whatever, okay, it's 20 minutes between pings. So I'll probably be doing that. Okay, so that's the phone and the tracker. Conditioning. Well, I definitely am not in condition to start this long hike yet. My pack was probably somewhere between 25 and 30 pounds. I have to admit, I had been very lax on the elliptical machine that I have. That's not going to prepare me for hiking totally, but not doing it is preparing me even less. I had slacked off on it, and I had been doing daily walks. We do have some slight hills in our area, and I kind of hike past some farms and everything, and it's a mile or 2 in the morning. Well, that's just not cutting it. So I've got to get back out on the elliptical trainer. So that was my lesson there. Wishful thinking on my part that somehow, because I had such a great hike next year, somehow that would carry over, to nearly a year later. Just not going to work out. So it was good that I learned that. So here's my final words. The actual lessons here, the details of them, the instances, isn't what's important. What's important and what's to the point here is always improving your hiking experience, always thinking of new ways to do things, always thinking of testing out new ways to use your equipment. If you do buy new equipment, always kind of bring it for a test run, like I had to with the Jetboil. I think it'll work out, but it was good for me to practice with it. And routines, really an understated and overlooked aspect of hiking. I mean, really getting out there so that you can do certain things that make your hiking more comfortable, that really is a big deal. And these shorter hikes are a great opportunity to test them out. So thanks for listening.